Hey everybody, I'm Ebony K. Williams along with Eric Bowling and Kat Timpf, and we are the Fox News Specialists. Well, the global stakes don't get much higher than this. President Trump meeting Russian President Vladimir Putin for the first time at today's G20 summit in Hamburg, Germany. So with that, we'll meet today's specialist. She's a Bosnian War survivor, a women's empowerment advocate, and a former Trump International Vice President. And she specializes in all things mixed martial arts. Senada Adzem is here. And he's a best-selling author, the founder of Skybridge Capital, and he was recently appointed by the Trump administration to be Chief Strategy Officer of the Export-Import Bank. So obviously he specializes in all things financial. Anthony Scaramucci is here. So Senada, I'll start with you because you've actually worked hands-on with President Trump as his VP, Trump International, and you also know this region better than most.
Yes.
When you look at the dynamic between Vladimir Putin and President Trump, what do you see? What's your lens tell you?
Well, having just come back from Russia, actually, I was in St. Petersburg and Moscow. I was very excited to see what's going to happen today. And I do believe this was a historic meeting. I do believe it went well, based on not just the body language, but also what was negotiated. And I do believe also that what's going to come out afterwards, because we're not privy to all the details of this meeting, we're going to find out that I believe President Trump had his opportunity to shine on the global stage. And this is such an important relationship right now with Putin because they have an opportunity to solve many serious problems that we're facing.
Speaking of relationships, Anthony, you also know the president quite well. And congratulations, by the way, on your new appointment.
Thanks, Ed.
So when we look at, a lot of people have questions, Anthony, about what this relationship between Putin and Trump was ultimately going to look like. They're face-to-face. What did you predict?
Well, first off, I'm glad that Senada said that she went to Russia and not me. Otherwise, I'd be in the gallows.
Oh,
thank God.
Well
Thank God
played.
it's you and not me.
Well played.
Let's see how that gets reported.
Yeah, I'll now say that I was there with you.
Another major development out of today's Trump-Putin meeting came over Syria. Secretary Tillerson again delivering the details to reporters.
A ceasefire has been entered into, and I think this is our first indication of the U.S. and Russia being able to work together in Syria. And as a result of that, we had a very lengthy discussion regarding other areas in Syria that we can continue to work together on to de-escalate the areas and the violence once we defeat ISIS, and to work together towards a political process that will secure the future of the Syrian people.
Okay, Senada, we know that when President Trump sent over those missiles to Syria, that was not well received, obviously, by Putin and Russia, and that was kind of one of those markers of the chilliness of the relationship. So this ceasefire, what do you see from it?
So I think it's going to be there and it's going to continue. Putin respects Trump. He may not be on his side. Of course, he has his own national and personal interests, of course. But I do think that they're going to respect that ceasefire. And President Trump intervened in Syria, despite many people suggesting not to do so. But he simply couldn't bear to stand witness to so many children being killed in the most horrific way. And trust me, I've lived through a war. I know what's it like. So when he saw those children being killed, he had to order.
New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio skipping town for Germany, planning to join the G20 protest. Yes, I did say protest.
So do you think, Senada, is this, he's playing for a bigger crowd? He's looking for a bigger platform. Forget New York City mayor. He wants to be some sort of national. He wants to be president. Maybe he does.
Look, Eric, everyone loves to go to Europe during summer. I do too. But I think he went to the wrong part of Europe at the wrong time. I think at this point we need to show unity. And if we have President Trump representing the United States of America at such important meeting, I think he should show support.
Forget support.
At home.
He went. Ebony, he keynoted the protests, the rioters, the anarchists' speech, their little get-together. He keynoted that. Well, America, his city's burning here. Right there. Up next, Republican senators facing increasingly unsafe health care protests as Mitch McConnell voices new doubts about getting a bill through. We're coming right back.
A technological S-curve like we have in other industries you'll have spiraling costs. And it was Reagan that deregulated telecom, and it was Jimmy Carter that deregulated airlines, and both ended up with magnificent results. It's time to deregulate healthcare as well as fix the healthcare system. And our president, President Trump, is capable of doing that, but needs to get a team in place to explain that.
I completely agree. I would like to see something that involves the cloud, that is more patient-focused rather than insurance company-focused or government-focused. What do you think should be done?
My opinion is that they have to step back first. When they're trying to rush things through, particularly during summer when everyone's take vacation, it's just not going to work. And I think we have to focus on the big picture. The fact of the matter is that the system doesn't work. And what's it going to take to fix it? So going back and looking at what's really important to people and how to address so many of these people's concerns who are protesting, so that we can find something that's not mean, quote unquote, that actually can help people and that can save lives. Because when you see human faces behind these numbers, then you forget that we can just get over this.
We're talking about real lives. But Anthony, I mean, obviously you're right? So you're talking about, so she's claiming that she didn't put any assurances to kind of limit the scope of the Clinton investigation. I think if it was just this stuff, Eric, that we're seeing, kind of maybe some suspect credibility amongst these leaked memos, maybe she'd be okay. But Jim Comey's still a problem for Loretta Lynch, because who could forget that compelling testimony that we all sat and waited for, where he basically said Loretta Lynch gave him Clinton campaign words around how to deal with the investigation.
Don't call it an investigation. Senada, in order to believe Loretta Lynch, you'd have to have a lot of things line up. And it just, for some reason, when it doesn't seem like they can all be true at the same time.
Eric, I mean, we're relying on this information based on Russian intelligence. They're probably correct, but at the same time, I feel like the sources are not fully disclosed. We don't know exactly how this came about. I do agree that she's in a tough spot, and I do agree with Kat that I think more things will come out. But as far as I'm concerned, I'm like kind of bored talking about the email probe, because once the elections were over and President Trump became president.
Well, I can just say that I'm sorry for the pain it might cause the families of the victims, and there's nothing I can do about the past, but I hope that the future I can do something about the future.
So Omar Khadir's plea to move on from the past taps into one of our great American values, second chances. Sounds reasonable enough, right? But what if I told you that he's asking to move on from being a vicious murderer? In 2002, at 15 years old, Khadir, a Canadian citizen, took part in a firefight in Afghanistan against the U.S. forces. During that battle, Khadir killed a U.S. Army soldier, Sergeant First Class Christopher Spear. Now, subsequently, Khadir pleaded guilty and was sentenced to an 8-year prison sentence in military prison. But here's where things get complicated. The Supreme Court of Canada later ruled that Canadian intelligence officials got the evidence from Khadir under oppressive circumstances, such as sleep deprivation during interrogations at Guantanamo Bay, and that they then shared that evidence with U.S. officials. So basically, the court decided that the plea was tainted by coercion. And on that basis, Khadir has appealed his conviction, and that appeal is currently still outstanding.
Due to American citizens.
Senada, I'm going to let you speak on it.
Yeah, I'm a war survivor. And look, I can tell you, living for 4 years without food or water or being shot at by snipers every day and mortars is not easy. So all I can tell you is that I can feel a lot of sympathy for victims of any conflict. When it comes to people who actually committed acts of violence, I also do believe that they deserve the right to a fair trial. I don't know in this case, I don't know all the circumstances, but it seems like that he said he admitted to all of the war crimes based on the fact that he was tortured. So while we don't know all the circumstances, my understanding is that the Canadian government wants to apologize and say, sorry, we didn't protect your human rights.
I just think the Canadian government is just being too fast on this, Eric. Like, what about letting the appeal process take its course, find out either his conviction stands or it doesn't, and then you address the remedy of whether or not he was, coerced or whatever. I think we don't know an answer, so that's what really bothers me about giving him $8 million. So now let me ask you this. You also worked with President Trump when you were VP of Trump International. Give me one memory of what that was like.
Oh, it was so tough. I remember working until like 11 p.m., starting at 9 a.m. for 6 days a week. And he would come after dinner with his wife just to see who was still at the office. And he always kept an eye on who was working hard. So he's very loyal to his people if his people are loyal to him.
All right, well, thank you to our Fox News specialists today, Anthony Scaramucci and Senada Adžem. And we thank you all for watching. Make sure to follow.